Good morning and welcome here this morning to the Meta office and to everyone who's joining us virtually as well. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. As well, offer my deepest respects to any First Nations people who are attending today or who are on the virtual meeting this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a really interesting discussion, and it's a topic which I'm personally extremely passionate about. We're going to listen to some research which is hot off the press and have a really robust discussion in regards to the different programs and different ways in which we can take some of these learnings to be more effective within our workplaces and within our lives. It's completely normal to have times when we're feeling overwhelmed or we're feeling anxious or we're feeling life is just a little bit much, whether it comes to work, whether it comes to family responsibility. And I'm really impressed with the turnout here today, and this is really heartening to see that so many people are taking this seriously and wanting to learn more. Couple of housekeeping things before we kick off. The bathrooms are just out towards the reception area on either side. In case of emergencies, we can use both of the doors here. The session will be recorded and it is being live streamed. So anything that you might kind of contribute or anything, just be aware that it is being recorded. And lastly, just a bit of a trigger warning that we might actually talk about some things which might be a little bit tricky to hear. We want to kind of have a really open and honest conversation in regards to mental health. So to be aware that there might be things which can be a little bit tricky to hear. And lastly, I would love to welcome up Jade, Harley, the Director of Partnerships for Unlimited, who's going to join us this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
I'll be back soon.
Good morning and welcome. Thanks to everyone for turning up here nice and early, and of course to everybody who's joined us online. And a big thanks to Kat and Dan for sponsoring our Big Chat series. And I hope you all got to enjoy a bit of the breakfast that was put on this morning as well. We're really excited to shortly share the survey results of the Mentally Healthy 2022 survey. This is hopefully going to help you understand how the industry is feeling, but most importantly, how we as an industry and as individuals can improve the mental health for this industry that we love. Mentally Healthy is a project that we started 5 years ago at Unlimited in partnership with our good friends at Never Not Creative. What started as an initial survey has grown into a whole range of different elements, from the Mentally Healthy Change Group, first aid courses, events and storybooks, and things like the industry minimum standards. So a whole heap of great initiatives have come off the back of that survey. The motivation for the survey has always been to understand the causes and really empower the industry to be able to improve our collective well-being and to make this industry more mentally healthy. Today, you'll hear the findings from the fourth Mentally Healthy study. It looks not only at the issues and causes, but also what people like yourselves want from organisations, how the way we work impacts our mental health, and what good mental health looks like. We hope you find the insights in the survey that you can take back into your organisations and hopefully create effective solutions that will really help improve the mental health, not just in your own companies, but across the wider industry. Before we jump to the results, I wanted to say a big thank you to our mentally healthy partner, Andy Wright. He's the founder of Never Not Creative and also the CEO of Streamtime. And he's been a wonderful partner and a key driver of this research for the last 5 years. So thank you, Andy. Andy will now share the results with no further ado. So please welcome Andy to the stage.
Okay. When she said it was hot off the press, I think it got sent over at 10:30 last night. So it's hot off the press, all right. So thanks for having me. Thanks, lovely introductions. It's great to be in this place, which is fantastic. So big jump into the future for a second there, Jade. This is the third report. But it'd be very interesting to know what happens in 2 years' time when we do the fourth report. So as we talked about, this has now been going since 2018. We did a wave in 2018, we did one in 2020, and now in 2022. Never Not Creative, Unlimited, Mentally Healthy, we all work together, but I also want to do a shout out to these amazing people who are a big part of like any of the kind of research initiatives that we do and work very closely together. So we have Catherine from Medium Rare, Emily, who's here in the room as well. Kate is a massive part of making sure that anything we do with Mentally Healthy works and happens. Nina as well, who's been here since day one with me. And this guy in the end, Ross, who Ross and I spent a long time on Sunday doing a lot of things that researchers do, like regression analysis, and there's other terms which I won't pretend to remember what they were. But that's the robustness of the data. He's definitely a big part of it. So we had nearly 1,400, if only we got those extra 3 people respond to the survey. A really good mix across the industry, mostly across Australia, I guess, but mainly Eastern Seaboard. Male, we can even, I think we've probably got the percentage of people in this room. We have this room, actually, probably reflected in these results. 32% male, 67% female. If I put the words mental health into anything, that's normally what happens with the split. It's hard. So the people who are men, well done for coming today, because it's not an easy topic, but it's great to be able to make sure that we can do something about it with you. The other thing that I want to do a thank you is we asked people in the survey, where do you work? We haven't asked that before, and it wasn't to kind of go, oh, where are the worst places to work? It's very much to try and find out, like, where are the best places to work? Who can we contact after this data to go, you know, can we talk to you more because things seem to be working? And so a big thank you to Spark Foundry, OMD, and DDB, because there was a lot of engagement clearly in mental health in those businesses, because those are the ones that came up highest. But lots of people took the survey from right across the industry. So it's split into 7 sections. That sounds a lot. But it's just to kind of make sense of it, and it was the 7 post-it notes that I started with when we looked at all the data. So we're going to look at our industry's mental health. We're going to look at our attitudes towards mental health. We're going to take a quick look at the effect of the pandemic on our mental health. We're then going to look at how individuals are coping, the way that we seek help, and what businesses are doing. And then we're going to talk about the way forward. So we've actually got a section here about, like, you know, who are the mentally healthy people in our industry? What kind of traits do they have? What behaviours do they have? How do they talk about their mental health? And then we're going to finish with, you know, where from here? What exploration do we want to do as a result of this research? And I guess the whole point of that is that every year we have used this research to drive whatever we do next. So in 2018, it was the minimum standards, came after the research. In 2020, it was the empathy research, and a lot more work that we did into empathy. And then we'll see what comes next after 2022. So, our industry's mental health. The good news is we seem a little healthier. Everything was a little bit more positive when it came to looking at what we call the DASS. So the DASS is the Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Scale. It's similar to if you go into your doctor and say, hey, I'm worried about my mental health. It's the kind of survey that you take there, and we actually brought that into our survey so that we can understand the symptoms of mental health, not just kind of your own rating of your mental health. So 46% of our industry displayed mild to severe levels on the anxiety scale, 33% moderate to severe. And you'll see actually that we've got all of the waves in here, and things are a little bit better. So this mild has gone up at the expense of the moderate and the severe, and so things are a little bit better. And interestingly, everything's like COVID dropped everyone's mental health a little bit for some reason. I think we were just a bit kinder on ourselves at that point. We did a COVID dip in our research. I think it was in like sort of April, May 2020. That was COVID, right? That was. It still is, obviously. But I think everyone was just a little bit kind of ourselves. It was a bit of a novelty, like we were all stuck in this together, and so things didn't seem as important when it came to work. So that did show little signs of improvement, but we have come back a little bit since then. It's a very similar picture on the depression scale, but you can see that some of these, like severe, extremely severe, moderate, they've all dropped. These numbers have been bigger in the past. There's still quite a lot. That's still nearly a third of people showing moderate to severe symptoms of depression, but it does show that things are a little bit better. This one's dropped quite a bit. So when I used to present this slide as 1 in 5 and 1 in 4, and now it's very much kind of 1 in 5 and 1 in 7? Is that the maths? I've got no Excel in front of me. But definitely these are better. And so these severe signs of anxiety, severe signs of depression are getting better, which is good. But that's always like at the surface level, and then we go deeper and we start to look at, like, are there any things where certain groups of people start to stand out? So this one was a really interesting finding as we kind of really looked into the DAS scores. If you're under 29, you're 1.5 times more likely to show signs of depression than respondents over 40. So that's quite a big one. And there's quite an interesting dynamic between kind of younger and older as we go through the data and we look at the different ways that symptoms are shown for people. This is another theme that's going to come up a little bit during the presentation as well. People in creative agencies are almost twice as likely to show moderate to severe symptoms of depression versus media agencies. So there's only certain places where we can kind of make different kind of comparisons within the data, but it is kind of creative versus media. And of course, that's generalized. You may work in a creative agency that's amazing and doesn't have any problems, and that's fine. But this is the overall data. Now, this slide has barely changed at all. These are the things that are really explaining the dynamics of where our stress comes from in the industry. At the top of this table is the pressure of our own expectation. So that's kind of a good thing, kind of a bad thing. I'll tell you one thing it isn't, which is what somebody told me the other day when I'd been in and presented to their agency, and then she said, so my boss came to me and said, actually, the biggest stress that you're probably experiencing is because of the pressure of your own expectations, so you need to go and work on that. It doesn't work like that, okay? Just to be clear. So I feel like there's a disclaimer on this slide now every time I present it. It's not the chance for an employer to just pass off responsibility about that. But you'll also see it's very closely followed by pressure from others, multiple responsibilities, constantly being asked to do more with less, unrealistic expectations, which actually comes into play when we've done a little bit more look at this in terms of the client and agency dynamic. Long hours, always on, self-doubt, working when sick. We do have some interesting findings around people working when sick. But I'm just going to go back to that sort of pressure from others bit as well. There's a ton of verbatims all the way throughout this survey where people shared stories. But this one said, the single biggest impact on mental health is toxic clients and their expectations. Advertisers need to acknowledge their role in this, and just as agencies are, rightly, in my opinion, being pushed to improve their approach to mental health, so too should advertisers be required to sign up to a code of conduct written into contracts. Park that thought. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. Another point, agencies need more headcount to be able to manage the amount of work. People work ridiculous hours and are praised for it, which is toxic. I think that praise bit we'll come and talk about on the panel a little bit. This is about kind of what behaviours do we reward in the industry. But this, I could give you, I think, like 100, at least 100 verbatims around this resourcing of our work and the way that we approach that in our businesses. It was a massive theme all the way through the survey. Now, if you've read about mental health, if you've looked into kind of mental health, you'll know how important sleep is. It's recognised as a key driver of good mental health. The Sleep Health Foundation recommends 7 to 9 hours of sleep for adults a night. And our sleep's got a little bit better. Maybe because, I don't know, we were all working from home a little bit more, or we've raised it as a more important thing to do to manage our mental health, but our sleep has got a little bit better compared to when we looked at it in 2020. Interestingly, we also kind of asked the number of hours of sleep you get a night, and then we asked you to say how good is your sleep, and they literally were like within a percentage of each other as to these recommendations by the Sleep Health Foundation. Weirdly though, and I don't know why this is, 43% of male respondents are poor sleepers, and 32% of female respondents are poor sleepers. So why are men sleeping worse than women? I don't know. Anyone know? Xbox? Premier League? I stay up late, watch Premier League. I don't know. This is a weird one, came out of the data. We were chatting about it. We couldn't really work out why, but it's an interesting kind of observation. Now then, we asked people, does your job affect your health? And there was quite a bit of agreement around this. 80% of people agreed that they often take their job home with me in the sense that they can't turn off. 69% agreed that their job does tend to directly affect their health. It keeps them awake at night. They work under a great deal of tension. When we think about how much time we spent working and our kind of awake hours, so much of it goes into work. So I guess it makes sense that our job really does affect our health. But there's other good things that are happening at work as well. So 90% of people have said they've been given the opportunity and resources to work flexibly. And that's not just great as in that's the top of the list, but flexibility actually and having a bit of ownership over how you work and the way that you work is really good for your mental health. And we've got more on that later. People are receiving positive recognition for the work that's well done. They've got opportunities available to them. They've been supported. This is a really good one. I think it's a theme as well that comes out throughout the survey, which is we're quite good at support. Like we're people. And when we do have the time to kind of be kind to each other or to recognize when someone needs a little bit of help, support actually comes up quite well in a lot of the data. Even that kind of, almost half being able to say that they've been sponsored or championed by a senior colleague to help them succeed. It's important to kind of get that recognition. And we're pretty satisfied with the other things that are sort of around us at work. So physical environment, the people we work with, the growth of our business. There's some positive signs around what people are talking about. And again, they're all part of that kind of mental health load that we might carry around with us when we think about work. There are some bad experiences. So we also borrowed a question from, if you'll remember, the Create Space survey that the Advertising Council did last year. And we wanted to take one of those questions around microaggressions because there was a big finding in that study and be able to try and say, like, hey, maybe we can go a little bit deeper on that and correlate some of the mental health data that we have around it. So we did ask the same question, and we checked the results yesterday, and they're actually very similar, which is good. 45% of people are saying that they've been interrupted or not listened to in meetings. 30% of people are saying that they're undervalued compared to colleagues of equal competence. 1 in 4 are saying that they believe their learning opportunities have been restricted by their manager. They're still quite big numbers, right? Like those, and they're things that are important to us potentially to be able to kind of progress in our careers. This is one of those where I'll pull out the differences between creative and media. 79% believe that opportunities have been available to them to learn and progress in their career compared to 60% of creative. The bigger ones, though, I guess to point out are some of, like, I've been bullied or undermined in some ways, 12% in media agencies, but 26% in creative agencies. So important to kind of recognize these things. And so that's stuff that we've sort of identified and we want to be able to explore further later. So let's look at our attitudes towards mental health. When we started the Mentally Healthy Change Group, it was one of those things where we're all doing it in our spare time. We're all volunteers, and like you look at the subject of mental health, and potentially you could just go big and go, oh my God, we want to fix the entirety of mental health in our industry. But we didn't, and we couldn't boil the ocean. So we were very clear on what our objectives were going to be, and our objectives were going to be around how do we smash the stigma around mental health. This was back in 2019, I think. And so we've been really conscious of looking at that number ever since and being able to measure it and feel like also we're accountable for it. And so our attitudes towards mental health, good news, have improved. And they've improved wave on wave. So this wave of research, we've seen a 24% improvement in the stigma. So in this case, we've called stigma, I disagree that people in my industry would be treated poorly if they were to disclose that they had been diagnosed with a mental illness. So that's gone up for the last 2 waves, which has been fantastic. 32, 39, 49. We hope that we can continue to see that. And we've got to look at like some of the great things that are happening in our industry. We're doing much more around mental health. We're having more conversations. We're having more events like this. There's more initiatives in place in businesses. There's people getting trained in mental health. All of that is rubbing off on, this idea that, hey, it's okay, you won't be treated poorly. Plus, we've all experienced mental health, which means we've got something to relate to. The interesting thing, though, is this, which is this one hasn't moved yet. So I'm really open to anyone like disclosing a challenge with their mental health, but I probably won't. And so there's this gap which is really one of the big next things that we want to be able to achieve. And there's a load of reasons for it. It could be that you just don't feel comfortable about opening up. It could be that you are looking for a promotion, or you're looking for a new job and you don't want to disclose something that might get in the way of that. But lots of these things, we're actually really open to it. We want you to talk to us, whoever you are and whoever we are. We're just not ready to say it ourselves yet. And we notice this especially with younger people. So 66% of under 25s disagree that people will be treated poorly if they disclose being diagnosed with depression, which is a massive number compared to like the average. But at the same time, 52% of people who are under 25 agree that they wouldn't tell anyone if they had been diagnosed with depression. That's a massive difference. So again, we've just got to get inside of this to be able to understand, like, what's stopping you? How can we help you be able to open up? And so we sort of formed a little bit of a hypothesis of perhaps maybe this is to do with just how confident you are. And also, when you first come into a job, when you first come into the industry, you just want to be able to be seen to perform, right? And that you're not rubbish. And so we looked at that and we started to see that disagree statement actually improves the older you get. So whilst we have 26% of under 25-year-olds saying they disagree, they would tell someone, it goes to 36%, 25 to 34. It goes to 40%, 35 to 44. I didn't get time to do after that, but we kind of suggested that it probably drops off a cliff because stigma does get a little bit worse as you get older. But that's quite interesting, but still doesn't make it kind of acceptable. Back to the media creative theme, are media agencies perhaps a more open space to be able to talk about mental health? 16% of media agency respondents agreed that someone would be treated differently if they were to disclose something about their mental health. But that doubles when we got responses from creative agencies. 34% of creative agency respondents agreed that someone would be treated differently. So that stigma kind of is still bigger and still exists a little bit more in the creative agencies. And I think that's even something that would be worth to kind of tackle on the panel as we think, why is that? What are the dynamics behind this that are leading to such big differences? What effect has the pandemic had? So obviously there was a lot that happened, and even just, I bet if you try to research stuff during that period, it would have been very hard, which is why it's nice to be able to kind of get our waves either sort of before and after, literally before and after. But we saw really, really, really good signs of things coming out of the pandemic. And actually, we deserve a bit of a pat on the back. So 70% of people said that they agree that leaders in their business handled the pandemic to the best of their ability, which was fantastic. I've heard stories of just leaders dropping everything to help people out in their business. The work became less important, the people became the most important. To the point where I've heard a leader actually did the rounds around people's houses, which also potentially was a bad thing because who wants their boss turning up at their front door thinking, is that going to be good news? I don't know. We should do this face to face. The pandemic's given our business and industry a chance to change things for the better regarding our mental well-being. Empathy has become more appreciated in our business as a result of the pandemic. That's fantastic. And finally, I believe that our business trusts me more as a result of the conditions imposed during the pandemic. Trust is a massive thing for mental health. Feeling like you're trusted, feeling like you can take responsibility for things and that the business trusts you to do that. So those were all great. But it was quite interesting to look at people's perceptions of their mental health before the pandemic and now. So we asked them to rate their own mental health out of 10. Pre-pandemic, it was 6.5. After now, kind of presently, it's 5.6. So there is that little drop. The other thing that we checked here was we looked at those mental health levels, especially for the 5.6, to see whether that correlated with the depression and anxiety and stress scale and scores that we got from just people talking about the symptoms they might have, and they were literally almost identical. So we're very good at naming our own kind of mental health and saying how we're doing. So what are we doing about it? Well, first of all, after family and friends, in terms of who we go and speak to, we go and see our colleagues. We're trying to have these conversations at work, which is important to recognize, especially if you're in any kind of leadership or management position, is that there's a good chance that someone might come to talk to you about their mental health. And it's a good chance for you to think as to, are you prepared for that conversation? Do you know what to do? So Chloe at the back is joining us on the panel, has been training. How many people have you trained in our industry now? Over 2,000 people have been trained in mental. Chloe's like a one-person reason for that stigma thing, I think, improving, right? 2,000 people trained in mental health first aid, which is fantastic. I think I've said before that I believe that mental health first aid course is not just great for mental health, but it's actually an amazing leadership course for spotting how people are doing around you and being made more aware of the kind of signs of like what might be mental ill health. So when you look at that, basically the same amount of people, their first port of call is going to be a boss, a colleague, or a peer, or a GP. So basically now you're in the same kind of position as like, I'm going to go and see a doctor, or I'm going to go talk to someone at work. A third of people have seen psychiatrists or psychologists in the last 12 months. That's a good thing. It doesn't mean that you've kind of reached this extreme of like, oh my God, I've got to go see a psychologist. It's actually a good thing to go and see someone, even when, even if you're feeling good, to be able to talk about the times when you haven't, or to be able to think about the times when, what would I do if this happened? So it's great that people are seeing psychologists. It's put a massive pressure on the availability of psychologists, but that's another point. You'll see there's other things in here. Interestingly, the need to go and kind of look at help online, so online forums, online mental health training and people has dropped, and I think that's kind of come a lot as a result of our quest for more human interaction. Last thing you want to do after being on Zoom all day is then go and have an extra Zoom about your mental health with someone. Men need more encouragement to talk about their mental health. This really comes out in terms of the help seeking, like, will you go and seek help? Where will you go and get help from? And so, yes, that's still good numbers. Almost 80% of men will go and talk to a friend or family member. But then we see some pretty big drops. So like it's only 1 in 5 going to see a psychiatrist or psychologist. Drops again for GP, drops again for boss and colleague. It's a thing that we've still got to get over, the stigma that lies around mental health for men, their perceptions of masculinity, their perceptions of kind of what kind of front they're supposed to put up at work, at home, out in society. And so that definitely needs improving. We've just done a podcast series recently called Creativity in Football about men's mental health, because you have to say, we'll talk about football, and then you hit them with it. Well, we're going to talk about mental health. There you go. But look that up. And actually, Simon, who was going to be on the panel today, is in that series. And it's good to get more and more people talking. There was a great creative leader in Western Australia who posted on LinkedIn last night about his mental health. The more people do that, the better it will help other people open up. But why don't they go and seek help? And this was, there's reasons for men and women as to why people don't speak up and why they don't go and seek more help. One of the biggest for men is, if I ignore it, it'll just go away. Like most things. Like that door that isn't fixed. Like other things, there's like the box that's been left around. This is a direct quote of, there's a box that's been left in my house for, I don't know, like the last 2 months that I'm supposed to have delivered somewhere. I finally did it last night. I tried to ignore it. It doesn't go away. Much like problems with your mental health. Other reasons, and this was high on the female side, is that I can't afford it. Now, we were quite surprised by this one because actually, you can go to your GP, you can get a mental health care plan, you can get your first, I think it's 20 sessions now, paid for. And so this idea of I can't afford it was quite an interesting one, and it only really came up as high on the female side versus the male side. Another big part was I'm ashamed. And the final one, actually, was taking time off. So this comes back to our work is always on. We can't possibly afford another thing to come into our lives to go and do something about it. And so we can't afford to take time off to put ourselves first. And I have heard stories directly from people who work in businesses who, where they've tried to ring fence time for a psychologist, and 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, and someone's going to put an internal meeting over that time in their calendar. And suddenly, and it's in there as a psychologist appointment. And so we've got to put people first for this kind of stuff. We can't think that those types of things are worthy of getting in the way. We've seen some improvements as well around, I guess, it's this sort of, mental health first aid training, much more discussions around mental health. 69% of us believe that we're good at spotting our own mental health problems, and that's an increase from 2022. So that's a really good thing as well. So some good, some bad, some opportunities. So what are our employers doing about mental well-being? We've seen some good gains in this. We've seen really good gains in how important people perceive their employers as taking mental well-being. So 53% believe that mental health is a medium to high priority for their employer, which is great. That's more than half now. That's a 33% increase in belief that businesses are making mental health a medium to high priority, and the same in that what they're trying to do is improving in effectiveness. That doesn't mean priority matches effectiveness, though. So here, we've got those two questions side by side. So these are massive gains, really, for the prioritizing of mental health. More than half. But what we still do have is this drop down to, is effectiveness as high as the priority? And it's still something to work on. But you can see that it is improving, and it's quite a big difference, wave on wave. So what we're doing is starting to work. It's really, really good. Those conversations, the support that we're putting in place, the programs that we put in place, definitely help. But we dig a bit deeper, and there's still quite a long way to go. So there's a gap between how leaders rank the effectiveness of mental health in their business versus how employees rank it. So leaders think that what we've put in place is really, really good, 51% more effective than actually what the people who work for them think. Media agencies rated as 72% more effective than people who responded from creative agencies. So again, we really should get under the skin of what's happening in these media agencies, because it sounds pretty good. Obviously, they're not all amazing, but it does make a difference. So there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that we can go, oh, you know what, let's fix mental health. If you all do this, it's all going to be fine. But there are lots of really helpful signals that we can start to do to show that we care, to say that we're taking this seriously. One of those is the minimum standards, which we launched in 2019, 2020. Now, we always have to explain that these standards are minimum standards. They're not particularly aspirational. And in fact, if you don't meet them, there's probably a bit of a problem. They've been endorsed by New South Wales Health. Some of them are directly taken from workplace law. So if you're not meeting them, that's a bit of a problem. But it's a good chance to kind of look at things that you should be doing in a business and being able to kind of make some changes at work if you need to. All of these businesses so far, I think we've now up to 130-something businesses that have signed the minimum standards. Quick show of hands. Do you think your business has signed the minimum standards? Okay. Half of the room, maybe, which means the other half are going straight back to work, looking up mentallyhealthy.org and checking out the minimum standards. Awesome. Because, not that the minimum standards fix everything, but when I say the signals, I think it's quite important. Because we asked people in the survey, hey, has your company signed their minimum standards? And if they said yes, they believed that the priority that their business was putting on mental health was over half. The effectiveness changes quite significantly. Now, it's not because of the minimum standards, but it's because that business signed the minimum standards means that they're probably doing other things. They probably use that as one of the things that they're doing to improve mental well-being in their business. Companies that have signed the minimum standards, the people who responded from those companies believe that empathy is more appreciated. They disagree more that people would be treated poorly, and they disagree more that they wouldn't tell anyone about their mental health. Now, I can't say, of course, this is research, there's the disclaimer, which is correlation isn't causation, but it's close. It's aligned. And I do think it's the signal, right? I think it's the signal that we're taking this seriously that helps. Now, another signal is, does your business put people first or does it put profit first? Again, a big theme that came up in a lot of the kind of open-ended questions throughout the survey. Here's one response. Agencies have been upfront about the impacts of the pandemic and staff shortages. However, teams are running at 50% full. It can be 6 to 12 months before hiring, with other people picking up the slack. New incentive structures should be implemented to reward the staff working over and above, rather than the agencies banking the unpaid salaries from the open roles. Like, that's a thought that's happening. It's also a great idea. Why not take the stuff that you banked and give it to the people that are left picking up all that extra work? Great idea. Might not happen everywhere. If we look at people's mental health self-rating, if you believe that your business puts profit first, your mental health self-rating happens to be lower. If you believe it puts people first, it happens to be higher. And it has an extra effect. So look at all of those measures that I showed you before around what are you experiencing. And again, these are like signals. They're kind of like cultural things, which are, I've been interrupted or not listened to in meetings. Higher for businesses that put profit first. I believe my learning opportunities of progress has been restricted by managers. Higher for people that put profit first. I've got opportunities to learn and progress. Higher for people that put people first. They're important things. So why wouldn't you? Our business culture has improved as a result of the changes that occurred during the pandemic. More than half for people that put people first. But this one is the one that I think you'll kind of take as like, this is why we should be doing it, right? Which is we've got a people problem, we've got talent shortage, we've got people leaving. Well, guess what? Businesses that are seen to put people first, that number drops to 17% for people that are considering leaving a business. So these signals can make a really big difference. Of course, we have to follow it up with actions and execution, but getting the kind of tone of your business, getting the culture of your business right makes a big difference. So what does the way forward look like? There's some good things that we can focus on, that we can start to do better, that can improve our mental well-being at work. Now, this slide was one of my favorite slides in the last research, and still is, and hasn't changed a dot. Pretty much. We still want to see more empathetic, educated leaders, leadership that leads by example, flexible working conditions, appropriate structure and resources, clear objectives. They are, by a country mile, the most important things. You know, look at this drop-off after that. Yet, a lot of businesses still going, we need to tackle mental well-being. So what do? We do all these things. Up to about here. Here. And maybe we'll put some fruit bowls around as well. That'll help. They're not bad things, right? But if you want to make a big difference to the problem and you want to put a dent in it, you'll start looking at the top things, which is really about how you treat people at work, how we design people's work, how we find role models, and how we look after them in our business and put them first. Not just go, right, let's address well-being. Has anyone got that well-being checklist? Okay, great. Fruit bowl, yes. Motivational poster, yes. EAP program, yes. EAP poster on the back of the toilet door, yes. I don't get that. That's like ads for sexually transmitted diseases go on the back of toilet doors. If we put that in the same kind of sphere as mental well-being, we're not really helping the stigma problem, right? Smart work. So this is a concept that was created by Curtin University. There's an institute there which is called the Future of Work Institute, which I think now is the Center of Excellence for the Future of Digital Work. Anyway, we've been working with them. And they have an interesting framework to look at how to improve satisfaction and health and make sure that what we're creating in the future of work is a safe space and a psychosocially safe space. So they look at these 5 things. And also this research is very similar to other models and other research that exists. I was reading last night a report by Black Dog Institute who also come to very similar conclusions in terms of the things that we should be looking at in terms of how we structure work to be better and mentally healthier. So there's 5 things. One is stimulating. So that's skill variety, it's task variety. It's like the stuff that we get to do every day. Is that stimulating? Mastery, which is can we achieve in our role? Like, do we have clarity on what it is that we're doing? Do we get good feedback? Are we able to identify what it is that we're supposed to be doing day to day? Agency, which is autonomy. You know, can I have a bit of control over the way work is scheduled for me, you know, the way that I work, the decisions that I make? Relational support, which does pack a little bit more in, but it includes social support and task significance, but also like the meaning. Do you feel like you're contributing to society? And tolerable demands, which will be one that we focus on, and probably one that kind of most is likely to relate to a lot of people in the room, which is the time pressure of your job, the emotional demands, the role conflicts that can occur. So here's what we found. First of all, we asked which of these is most important for you, and then we asked what's your experience of them in your business at the moment. So what we found was they're all pretty important, right? But also we start to index higher on tolerable demands, like that's really important for us. Relational support is really important for us. Control over our job, really important for us. Being able to identify and make sure that we know what we're doing. But when we get to what the reality is, we can start to see some changes. So I was going to do like this cool little thing where we just keep going back and forwards so you can just kind of see. Or if someone wants to boomerang it, even better. I should do that. I'll do that for tomorrow. We'll boomerang this slide. Perfect. So what's important? What's reality? So you can see actually these tolerable demands, somewhat, not at all, we're up, right? Like we just don't feel like we're getting the ability to kind of manage the demands on our time, the demands on our emotions, our ability to cope with the amount of work that's in front of us. Relational support, not quite as much either, although actually it's pretty good compared, I think, overall. Now, if I look even further, and we did some more analysis around this to go, okay, let's look at, this basically increases when the symptoms are poorer. So people with moderate to severe anxiety experience sort of 51% dissatisfaction with that measure when it comes to tolerable demands, and indeed all of the measures rise. Clarity, ability to identify what they're supposed to be doing and achieving increases if you're showing more symptoms of anxiety. Media v creative, again, very significant differences in importance and reality. So you can see even like on this one over here, the importance for creative or tolerable demands is 81%. The reality of are they experiencing it, 24%. Working people to exhaustion with constant check-ins and deadlines, then having an EAP or mental health policy should not be the norm. It's everywhere in this industry, and bad employers should be held to account and called out. So we can't use those things as like an excuse or as like a mop-up for the things that we're creating. So there's a lot of charts in that, and I created a new thing. Instead of TLDR, we had too long, fell asleep. But if you're still awake, relational support is really important. We're okay at it. Tolerable demands are really important, and we're pretty poor at that. This framework is worth looking into. It's worth looking, if you go back to your work, to try and see what you can do to look at, if we're going to tackle mental health, let's look at these components, not just the well-being programs. And as if we didn't already know, time pressure and emotional demands are a significant issue for the creative industry. So let's have a look at healthy people. Are these healthy people? I don't know. It was just a great GIF. Profile of our mentally healthiest people. So we took people who self-rate at 8 to 10, and we took people who rate average or lower. They get a much better night's sleep. They don't work when they're sick. They don't take their job home with them. They have a really strong sense of support around them, and they would speak up, more likely to speak up if they had a mental health issue. These are the people you want to look for in your business and go, right, how do we clone them? How do we help other people be like these people? They're more likely to have received positive recognition for work well done, more likely to have been given the opportunity and resources to work flexibly, more opportunities available and to learn and progress in their career. These are all things that improve when you start to see that they're mentally healthier. And the things that were not so great drop off significantly. They're less likely to be interrupted or listened to in meetings. They're less likely to kind of see people taking credit for their ideas. There's lots of stuff here on that slide you can see. So there's another reason for kind of looking at the mentally healthier people in your business and go, it's almost like you could do this yourselves, you don't need us. You could ask these questions and you could start to see where these levels get to in your own business. And I think that's a great way of looking at how we're accountable for it. In fact, that's a good idea. We should probably take the survey, cut it down and give it to people so they can do their own. Further exploration. So there's more. Every time we do this research, you just kind of get more and more into it, and you want to be able to kind of find out more and more, and you go and check all the data, and you start crossing things with each other. But I think there's some really big things that have come up out of this that we want to tackle for the year, next year and beyond. So our call to arms, I guess, for 2023 is this. Look at how we work. Go beyond wellbeing programs. Still do the wellbeing programs. I think they're important. Still do the training. It helps everybody's education. I got that at the end. Continue the training education. It's helping reduce the stigma, and it'll help people prepare for the conversation. That's important. We can't have all these people, and I have seen this a bit recently, where I felt a bit guilty. I think we've done such a great job of asking people to speak up, but then they get and talk to a manager who's perhaps not ready for that conversation, and it goes badly, and it puts them off, right? And so there's a few nods around the room. Maybe people tried that. So the more and more that we keep pushing in that space, the more and more we can improve that. So that's a good thing. Prioritize mental health by looking at those tolerable demands in your business. It's dominated a lot of the verbatim and the open-ended questions. And the other big thing, and Nina and I were chatting about this yesterday, is like learn from each other, showcase the good examples. We can all benefit. Mental health, let's try and use this as like a community issue in our industry, not a, we've got better mental health, come and join us, right? This isn't a competitive thing for talent. This is like, how do we make everybody's mental health better? And set the right tone in your business for a mentally healthier culture. There's some things. Send the right signals. It will improve things. Obviously, follow it up with execution, but it can really, really help. And you can see how big the differences are in the numbers. So finally, I've nailed the timing, which is amazing. So final slide. Here's what we're looking to do over the next few months, year, and beyond. So one of the first things, and this has been an idea that's been sat in sort of Never Not Creative now for quite a while. I've spoken to lots of people about it. They're probably like, okay, you're going to go and do it. And now we are. So we're actively looking for people who want to join a bit of a group around looking at writing a social contract for our industry. And that's a social contract between agencies and their clients. And it works both ways, right? This isn't just, oh, agencies are annoyed by clients, and so here's all the things you've got to be nice to us about. It's both. Because we've got lots of contracts about covering our asses and who can sue who and who owns what IP, when we should be paid, what we won't pay for, what we are paying for. We've got nothing around how we treat each other. And there are businesses that do this well. I know one business that like writes up a set of rules that they agree with the client on a wall at the beginning of a project. And it's really easy for them to go, hey, you see that number 4? You're not really delivering on that right now. Like we agreed we were going to not contact each other after 6 p.m., perhaps, right? Those types of things. So that's something we're going to work on together. I've already got people interested in this. I've got a lawyer interested in it. I've got a couple of clients. We've got a couple of agency heads. We want more. And then next, so we've identified all these things with systems. So we need to get underneath that. We need to understand, like, what is it about the overall kind of systems within businesses that are not working? And so we're going to do a bit more in-depth kind of qualitative research around that. And we need people to help us with that. We need people. We'll design the kind of research and the interview structure, but we want you to be able to help us to go out and talk to businesses about that. And then finally, we have this wild idea for an experiment, which I was talking to Imogen about earlier, which is we want to take sort of the microcosm of a working industry relationship, which is a creative agency, a media agency, and a client, and work with them for a year to see whether we can improve the system and the way of working. At the same time, we'll have a control group who we don't work with, basically everybody else, and produces these results, to see whether we can find the levers that actually make a bit of a difference now. Right, so going beyond just wellbeing programs, going beyond just the research, but see whether we can start to find some signs and create a blueprint for how to be able to fix the ways of working. And it's going to include everything. You know, it's going to look at organisational culture. It's going to look at the way that we work. It's going to look at commercial relationships that we have. It's going to look at the way that we treat people. And it's going to look at how much money those businesses make at the same time. So it's going to be very, very interesting. It sounds like a massive piece of work now. I've just talked about it. But I think it's the only thing that sort of will allow us to kind of really move forward and continue to make a dent in this problem. That was a lot of slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, so much. We're just going to roll up some chairs and have a bit of a panel discussion, but I just want to acknowledge, Andy, that one of the things that's really good for my mental health is really good design, and I was really pleased with it. Was just like, it was really nice for my senses. It was good. You put a lot of work in. I'm impressed.
So I did, but I also have to say, Emily gave me assets to use, and they were a lot
Thank
of
you,
fun
Emily.
to build a presentation with, so yes.
It was great. Okay, joining us on stage now with Andy, we've got Imogen Hewitt, the ANZ CEO of Spark Foundry, and Chloe Hooper, the founder of Bare Feet. Come on in. I feel like we've got a lot to talk about with that research.
Colour coordinated chair. Ace. Oh, legs are still too short.
Same.
I'm going to start with you, Imogen. I would love to ask you, from that research, what's the thing that kind of sticks out for you the most, or that surprises you the most?
I think a couple of things. One, I don't think you can do much about something if you don't understand. So the fact that the research exists in the first place is a really good thing that always sticks out for me. It's great that we're making improvements, but it still bothers me enormously how we compare to the general population. And I'd like to try and, we think about ourselves as being really progressive as an industry, but that bothers me, that as compared to the general population, we're just not doing as well.
Yeah, it's a bit frightening, isn't it? Chloe, thank you for joining us relatively last minute onto this panel.
No worries.
Much appreciated. And it was a shoes optional affair. So
Yeah, it always is with me. I can't present with shoes on. This is it. Yeah.
So you've got to know the things that actually help
Yeah.
with your
This
mental health.
grounds me. It's good
good.
for me.
What about you? Anything surprise you from that, or not surprise you that?
I was actually really pleasantly surprised of how much we've improved.
Great.
It worries me slightly that we kind of go, oh, we're better now. And that's obviously not the message that Andy was making, but like leaders could go and think, oh, okay, well, it's kind of working. And I think that we are so early in our journey that the message of things have improved. I guess my key takeout is let's still see, to your point, how far we've got to go, because comparatively to other industries, we still are quite far behind. So yeah, it was good news, and I'm really proud of like everyone in this room. Like I'm seeing familiar faces that I know who are like really passionate about mental health themselves, and that's why they're all here. But it's the people that are not here that we need to kind of like bring on that journey with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a lot of good news there, but it wasn't all good news. And Andy, I'd love to chat with you specifically around kind of the difference we're seeing in the results between creative agencies and media agencies. And what do you think is the kind of the key dynamic at play there that's causing this sort of stark difference?
So I mean, neither are great, right? Like I guess that's part of the story as well. But there are some dynamics in the way that creative agencies work. The fact that a lot of them will work on project-based work, right? So you're constantly chasing work, or you're constantly then also pitching to chase that work, right? So there was there's always a lot of verbatims around that, around how we're kind of scheduled to be, what's the 80% billable? And but it doesn't take into account the fact that you've got to work on a pitch, or you just worked all weekend, or you've just done 3 weekends in a row and 4 late nights. And so that kind of like always on part comes from a lot of it of being a sort of project-based sometimes business. There are also, like it's hard, like how long does it take to come up with an idea, right? How long is it going to take to craft the thing that you want? And also when the pressure of our own expectation is so high, what you're putting out into the world is you. And so I think that does come out a little bit for that. Now, there's other things on the media side, which people talk about in the survey, which is around resourcing, around also another big problem for both is there's been a lot, and Mark Code wrote about this, was it last year? And then it sort of got revisited this year in MI3, which was there's been such a shortage of talent that we've moved people into positions that they're not ready for yet. And we're paying people more money than they've ever been had. Well, you might not agree with that, I don't know. But according to the employers, you're paying them more money for jobs than before. And that increases the pressure so hard, right? Like you're putting people into things that it's great that they got them and they've got these opportunities, but at the same time, have we put like the guardrails around them to go, hey, you're going to succeed now? So there are a lot of like dynamics, I think, right? In terms of just the way that work gets done, the nature of the work. But then, I think I could go to almost any creative business tomorrow and go, hey, what have you done to train your people recently? What have you done to help managers who are, weren't managers before and are now? We basically reward people for the work that they did and the output and the deliverable of the work that they did, and then put them into management and leadership positions. But we didn't show them how to manage. They might be a terrible manager, and actually it might be better if they never manage. Doesn't mean they're a bad person, might just be better that they focus always on the work. And so those things come up quite a bit.
And do you think that that's approached differently in creative agencies to media agencies, that kind of progression up to management and the support that's there, or?
There is this like weird ladder in creative agencies, right? Which is you've got sort of intern, exec, or junior, then like an extra few layers, and then associate, and then another one, and then associate, executive, director, blah, blah, blah. And so we create all these things, and it's just like, it's this, someone else is getting that, and so I should get it, or I'm as good as them. And so we just don't, I don't think anyone's ever gone, hey, here's your promotion. By the way, here's what's expected of you at this level now, right? Like, this is different here at this level to the one you were here. And also, here's what you need to do to get to the next one. Usually, I say usually, maybe that's harsh, but a lot of the time, it's that we gave you that promotion so you won't leave, and we can't afford to give you a pay rise. Right? Like, that happens a lot. Yeah? I don't know, has that happened in your businesses? I've seen it, so I do know it happens. So again, it doesn't help. It's just not, sometimes I just think we're not that professional about running a business.
Imogen, what do you think?
I'm not going to comment too broadly on what anybody else does, because I don't know. But I think in the last sort of 25 years or so, I've certainly seen lots of examples of that. I really buy that we reward people for being really good at what they deliver from a craft perspective, and then we plonk them into a management role and expect them to be able to manage the complexity of humans, and humans are really complex. And without much training, that is incredibly draining for that manager, but it's also a poor experience for the people that are meant to be being managed. So that's not ideal. What we have done is create a lot of kind of collateral around what is expected of you at every stage, and what are you not delivering now that you would need to deliver in order to get that next promotion. And a really frequent and very intentional, in fact, our people strategy is called Frequent and Intentional, which is about having the right kinds of conversations as often as you possibly can. So the idea of having a check-in once a year and then expecting there to be some kind of miraculous da-da moment where everyone understands each other is just nonsense. And so we are trying to do things like give people very clear pathways about what happens next and what's required of you and what's required of us to enable you. And even things like we've developed a guided conversation that happens every month for every manager in the business. Because I think the expectation that people are naturally able to have these kinds of conversations, which can be both professional, but more and more often are very personal. How are you coping? Do you need my help with something? How am I doing as your manager? What are the things that you want to tell me but you haven't told me? Do you want to talk to somebody else other than me about this? All of those sorts of things don't necessarily come naturally. So it's a bit weird to have written it down, but we think writing it down will get you maybe 75, 80% of the way there, and then some people will have the natural affinity for the next 20%, and some people would never have got to the 75, 80 without it being written down. So it's a constant evolving process.
And that's one of those things that I spend more of my time with creative businesses than I do with media ones, but I only really get those stories from the media businesses. Like, I don't know whether it's because whether it's time or the priority that you put on people, but like that, how to have a conversation. Here are the levels, here are the structures. I mean, Spark clearly is good at that stuff, and there might be some others that aren't, but it just doesn't get, I've worked in creative businesses, that's never been in any of them. And partly my fault, right? I ran some of them. So that's
like
part
I said,
of the problem.
constant learning,
exactly.
constant evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that's to do with, creative versus media or people versus people or what kind. I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before around. I wonder one hypothesis perhaps is, I presented that people profit thing, right? And I think actually potentially in creative there's another one above profit, which is the work, right? And you talk to people in the industry and they will tell you, people who are coming into the industry even will be told by creative directors, but it's all about the work. You'll go to a award school, it's all about the work. And so the work's there, then the profit, then the people. Like you just dropped another layer down the list.
It's weird though, right? Because in my experience, and particularly with some of the work that we are doing around people's happiness, the happier the people, the better the work.
Yeah.
So it's not, they don't have to be two polar opposites or pulling apart from one another. They actually serve one another pretty well. Yep. If you've got people who are thriving and believe that they're well supported and that you are doing as much of the right things as you know how. Like we don't know what we're doing better than anybody else. We just listen a lot and try really hard to get it right. And then when we get it wrong and people tell us, we accept that we got it wrong and we change it. Like that's kind of the underlying safety net of it all, is being very honest about we're not really sure either. I think there's a lot of nervousness in this conversation because you just don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And you don't, the last thing you want to do is make it worse. So, you know, it's interesting you were saying, it's like with a little bit of trepidation around we've opened a conversation, but have we equipped people to have it? I really buy that because I think most of the people I work with, I tend to believe everyone is trying to do the best they can possibly do most of the time. But that doesn't mean that you know how to handle a conversation about, you know, something really devastating for someone or something that's just really ongoing and they've finally got to the point where they're like, I think I need to talk to someone about this, and then they have a poor experience.
And you have to be prepared
tough.
because the person who's coming to you has been preparing for that conversation for weeks, and then they go, have you got 10 minutes? Right? And suddenly you go, oh crap, I didn't know that was coming. And you might not be prepared for that.
Yeah.
So it's worth, even if you are going to be the person speaking up, it's worth thinking about like how you prepare the person that you're going to talk to for that conversation as well, because it suddenly could just come out of nowhere.
And especially from looking at the data that people are going to their managers just as often as they're going to their GP to talk about their mental health. It puts a really interesting kind of a different level of expectation or of, you know, a skill which is required from these managers. But just to kind of change tack for a second, another way to split this data was to look at it from age. And I was really surprised to see that people under 30 were actually self-rating much lower than those over 40. And I'm wondering, I mean, if we've got any kind of idea around sort of what's going on there. Is it a matter of kind of there being awareness? Is it not having enough autonomy? Is it like, do we kind of have any ideas of the dynamics there?
I think that what you're saying is really interesting in terms of leading on from the management, right? Because what we saw in the empathy survey is that leaders, and it came out again, leaders see themselves as, yeah, we're being really empathetic, we're doing everything we can, we've got all the right systems and processes in place. And the kind of Gen Z, the new generation that are coming in who are actually being led by the managers are going, actually, I'm struggling. But the problem we've got and the reason why we have disconnect is because we're not training that management level up in the right way. And I think that most people just need to feel heard and they need to feel like they belong somewhere. And that's what we're currently not creating, I don't think, as kind of an industry-wide level, because to your point, we move from one thing to another. And I think I loved, Andy, the slide at the end around the plans around what we're going to do next, because we actually don't know. Like, I work with MIQ, I can see Alicia over there, and she asked me to do some management training for them. And I was like, okay, what do you, like, I don't have a particular program around this, because I think what we need to do is actually find out what do they need to be trained on, like what's going to be really important for them right now. Like, I don't think we're asking enough questions. I think we're doing a lot of like, okay, we've put this in place for you, but for that younger generation, we actually need to hear what's important to them before we can act. So we're going into this management training, I was like, fuck, I've got no slides, I'm not going to have a plan around this, I'm just going to hear you and learn what you want to learn, and then go on that journey with you. And I think that we need to get better at kind of going into conversations and saying, I don't have the answer to this, but I want to hear you. And just to build on your point, I read a study from Deloitte yesterday, which was around Gen Z's kind of coming in and feeling that way and speaking out about this. But they're worried about so much going on in the world, right? There's so, like, the world's in a really scary place right now. Like, we're all feeling that pressure at the moment. And I think we feel responsible in a way, but my, you know, when I think about the environment and stuff, I'm not going to be alive to see what's happening to that. Like, I'm going to be dead, which is obviously quite sad. But this younger generation that are coming in are like, fuck, the world's in a really bad place. Like, we need to do something about this, but not necessarily really feeling empowered to do something about it. So I think that external factors, kind of those in the circle of influence, the things that are influencing them are really high pressure because they're wondering what their world's going to look like in the future.
I think there's a bit of catch up, right? Which is the reason why that number, the under 29s, 66% more likely to disagree that people will be treated differently, is because they've been growing up with that attitude, right? Like if you go to, I'm always amazed, I look back to when I went to school and you go, we had none of this stuff then, you know, but now they've got well-being programs, they've got mindfulness, they've got all these things of like thinking about like growth mindset, right? How to get over problems and that kind of stuff. Didn't have that when I was a kid. Now, let's look at people in their 40s who didn't grow up with that. Now are a bit newer to this conversation that's happening around mental health. And then people who have been growing up with it. And suddenly they've come out of school or university or chats with their friends and they've been dropped into this environment of work going, oh, it's a bit different, right? Like people are saying I shouldn't talk about that. I remember someone, I edited Gabberish for an issue, which is like this online magazine for the industry. And I asked for pieces from people about empathy. And someone sent me this very long piece about her experience at an agency and the stuff that she's been through, but how she's got out of it the other side. And it was excellent, and we were ready to publish it. And then she showed it to her boss, who said, I don't think you should say that. Even if it's anonymous, I don't think you should put this out there. And so there's this kind of, again, there's like this, it's a bit like, you know, your mum and dad saying you shouldn't do that degree. They'll tell you because of what they did when they were, you know, when they were that age. And so there's this generational change where I think we're just not quite catching up. We're doing our best at the slightly older level to go, hey, we're trying to understand, we want to be able to, you know, do better. And you see that from the prioritizing of mental health. But the how you do it and how you do it in a way with people that have been, you know, much more sort of been learning it as a language as they've been growing up is a bit different. And I think there's a bit of a mismatch there, perhaps.
And do you think we're gaining traction there? Do you think it's improving, or do you think that that's actually going to continue?
No, I think it's improving. Also, you're going to get some of those people that then move into management positions, and it's going to be better, like people, hopefully, right? So I think, yeah, generationally, it's changing, and that's what's so great about this study. Like, we don't do it every year; we do it every 2 years. I'd love to say it was by design, probably just because we don't have time. But if we now be able to look at when we do it in 2024, that 6 years gap is like one of those SBS programs where they track someone at, you know,
Oh yeah,
7 Up.
7 Up.
there we go.
Yep.
Right, we can almost do that with the study soon to be
Yeah.
able to go, like, what's the difference between 2018 and 2024?
Yeah.
And that would be kind of generational. People who had like joined the industry are now in probably decent, like got some management experience behind them and you know, more responsibility and that kind of stuff. It'd be interesting to look at.
One of the other interesting ways to split the data was around men and women, or male and female, and it's astonishing how much the difference between the results when you kind of split it by gender. Can you talk to me, Andy, a little bit about what you think is going on there in regards to why men's mental health seems to be still suffering so much worse?
Yeah, it's a stigma thing. You know, we're less likely to talk. I'm great at things like this. I'm awful at home, right? Or like people, I find it much easier to talk about stuff like this with people I don't really know, or I know I'm going to leave quickly after this, and so no one can ask me any questions. You can. I'm not going to leave quickly. But so it just feels a little bit more. I treat it like a project, and that helps me. So yeah, it's that. It's, you know, we saw empathy research. There's all these like masculinity traits that we think are going to be rewarded for us to get ahead. You know, they're things that we've got to show that we're like infallible, and that's the only way to get ahead. I think it's changing, but it's sort of what we've been taught. You know, most of my working life, I've been in very male-dominated environments, and I've spent the last 5 years trying to unteach myself the stuff that I've learned.
I think men are really keen to learn when they're put in those situations though, because so we were basically getting no men sign up for my mental health first aid course. Like we'd put it out to the industry and we'd have like all women show up. And then Chris Frill kind of like put a group of people together and said, all right boys, like come on, you need to like step up and show us that you're committed to this. And Danny Bass ended up getting a big group of them together. And I remember going onto this call, I've got all kind of senior like CEO type men in the industry, they're all in their suits, and I'm thinking, oh God, this is going to be the hardest thing because they're all going to be really kind of against this. It was the most informative course I've ever done. Like I learnt so much from them as well, and they all opened up, they were all vulnerable. Like I can't share any of that because it's confidential, but like you wouldn't believe how much they cared and how honest they were about like, I don't know how to do this, can you help me? And I think it's a case of like, we just need to create more environments where that's possible, because they were the most engaged group I'd ever had. And I almost put a bit of an armour on before I went in, like, all right, laddie banter, I can do this. But they didn't want that, you know, they wanted to learn from what was going to be the right thing for them and their people. So that was a real eye-opener.
That's such an important point, because there's a lot of, we get verbatims like this in the survey around, there's a lot of pressure now because of all this focus on mental health to open up. And people are like, what if I don't want to? Like, does it feel like, oh, I have to come to work? I think, well, wasn't there one, like, I have to come to work and do a presentation about my mental health? You know, that's what it feels like at some points. But the right environment, like that group you just talked about, Chloe, we've got a group at Never Not Creative that we're working on called Allies. And it's very senior men in our industry have come together to work and talk about how we can better support women. And people, they're shit scared. We're all shit scared of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. It's similar to mental health. But in a group like that, where you can make mistakes, we have great conversations. And we talk about like, what are we going to do and how we're going to do it. And now we're extending the group and we're scaling it out, and they're going to like take on other groups and this kind of stuff. But as long we've got to create the space and the rules, and they're like, hey, it's okay to fuck up, because no one's perfect. But because of that infallible thing, we're always sort of fighting that.
I think the other thing is we as an industry, and maybe it's all industries, I don't know, I've only been in this one and I've been in it for like forever. So, but we talk about ourselves when we introduce ourselves, when we talk about what we do, we talk about the job and very rarely the human being. So, you know, you walk into a room, you go, I was, no disrespect, but Imogen Hewitt, ANZ CEO of Spark Foundry, is the way that I was just introduced. Yes, about that much. And mother and wife and friend and person that worries about saying the wrong thing and person that needed to pee as soon as the panel started, because I still get really nervous about these things, and all of those sorts of other things are a reality, right? So one of the things that we did and we do at Spark is introduce ourselves as who we are as people. And so we have every month or 6 weeks or so, depending on how many new people we have in the business, we have the entire leadership team spend 2 hours having breakfast and talking about who they are as human beings, one by one. There is a bit of, and you can come to me for this, and I run this kind of team, and blah, 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 but most of it is just encouraging people to talk about the humanity of themselves and the people that they love and the things that they care about and their career paths in terms of the ups and the downs and the bits that they got wrong and how they, you know, how they ended up here and all of that sort of stuff. And the feedback we get is twofold. One, people are quite relieved because they're like, oh, they're just real people. I think, you know, I often find it really very hard to understand how people still say, oh, you can be a bit intimidating. And I'm like, really? But I guess if people feel it, it's true, right? So we were really intentionally trying to break down some of those barriers so you can come and talk to any of us about anything. But the other thing is that they just kind of think, well, I feel like I can go and have a chat with that person now. I feel like I understand that, you know, Matt likes his tea with 2 tea bags and is obsessed with football. Fine. All manner of things, but it's just a little bit more, can we be human first and then get on with the jobs that we've got to get done second?
I find I've only recently, a couple of months ago, returned back from maternity leave, and one, very thankful that I've returned back to a company in which I know and that is really supportive. But there is definitely, I'm learning a whole different way of being vulnerable at work because there are moments where I'm just not coping and I just am like, I am getting calls almost daily from the daycare. I've got 1-year-old twins and I swear to God, they just take it in turns of being sick and then kind of like juggling that. And I'm so thankful that I've got a good relationship with my manager that there are times I can just be like bawling my eyes out being like, I just don't know how to breathe anymore. And then there are other days where I'm high-fiving. I'm like, I can totally do this. I'm smashing it. So, and being able to kind of have that sort of that openness and that flexibility, which, you know, is also changes, your need for that changes depending on what stage and what phase of your life and your career and the other things, multiple things that are going on. I wanted to end with one final question, and that was in regards to this, you know, connection of purpose and meaning to our work and the impact that that has on, you know, our mental health. And I might actually ask each of you this question because I think it's really important. So Chloe, what do you think in regards to that?
Okay, so this is going to feel like a plug because my whole business is set around purpose, but I didn't know I was going to be on this panel, nor did I know I was getting this question. But for me, I think I don't believe in personal purpose. I think it's bullshit. Like, as Imogen just said, like, we've got so many different layers to our personality. Like, people who are going in search of personal purpose is just like, you can't. You've got too many facets to who you are. But I think that the best organisations, and when anyone ever asks me like who's doing this well, it's the ones that have got a really clear kind of purpose and a vision, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're CSR. It's like, what is the rallying cry that you have to your organisation that is like, we are all working towards that? Like, when I was at PhD, that rallying cry was to be the smartest company in Australia, right? I was there for 6 years. You couldn't have paid me to get off that train and not be part of that journey. I literally got offered once 70k to leave, and I was like, no, not 70k more, sorry, to leave my job. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it because I'm on this journey to become the smartest company. So for me, businesses who want to create that sense of belonging, want people to invest in them, want their clients to invest in them, need to create a place where you belong, design, to Andy's point, an employee experience where people feel like they belong. And yeah, we all personally need to sack off and find purpose within that. And then when we go home, our purpose is to be a great mum, or in my case, my purpose is to feed my boyfriend because he's always hungry and I absolutely love cooking. You know what I mean? That's really sad and pathetic, I know, but that's what makes me happy. I'm such a loser, I can't believe I just said that and it's being recorded. But do you know what I mean?
It's a safe
space. It's those different moments in our lives that bring out our purpose. Like, don't chase personal purpose, find an organisation that fits with who you want to be, what train you want to get on. And that's, to your point on the slides, Andy, like, that's how you create retention, because you'll build an environment where people are like, you couldn't pay me enough to leave, I'm in this.
What do you think, Imogen?
Well, I do agree with all of that. I think what I would say as well is that those organisations that I have been a part of where purpose, vision, values and behaviours are not a dictation from the top, but are something where you listen to what people need, you accept that things change, you try and build it out of a groundswell rather than I'm the boss and I say we all go after this, is a more successful way of doing that. And it's messier and it's harder and it takes longer, but it's so much better because then you end up with people who are like, I feel like I'm part of this because I'm building this, not because it was built for me. And that makes it sound like you're kind of reinventing it all the time, but the reality is you are reinventing it all the time because there are always people coming in, there are always people, hopefully less and less, leaving, but it's kind of an evolving thing. I think that there's a couple of principles for that for me, and they're really simple, and that is just don't make promises you're not going to keep, and speak openly and frequently about the good and the bad. And if you can do those things and accept that people around you, from the person that joined yesterday who might be in their first role to the most senior person that you have, as a trusted advisor, all of those people have something to contribute, and they will have different perspectives and they're all going to be interesting. Like I said, that's a full-time job in itself, listening to all of those stories. But I reckon that's how you create places that people want to be, because they feel genuinely part of it as opposed to this is us, you fit in.
What about you, Andy, in regards to purpose and meaning and the connection to work and mental health?
So I think that it's about finding stuff that you love doing and it's rewarding for you. And then you find this state of like what they call flow, right? Which is where, so I think a lot's been made of burnout in our industry in the past few years. And quite a few people will get to the idea that burnout is around long hours, you're working too hard, like you've got to switch off, blah, blah. There's another side to that, which is if you hate your job and you can't find the meaning in it and the purpose behind it, and you're working long hours, then it's shit, right?
It's
And
drudgery,
you will
isn't it?
really, like, you will feel it big time. But if you love what you're doing and you can see where you're going and you've got like the clarity of like, I know this is achieving something, I know I'm doing this for good. Like in some cases, it's okay to work a little bit longer, right? Like, I mean, I can, this thing is not my day job, but I love doing it and I found purpose and I can lose myself. I can go, oh, wait a minute, shit, it's 2 a.m. But we love doing it. And so I think when you find that flow and you just kind of, you can lose sense of like time and things going on around you, you found something that you know you love doing. You then have to have a little like personal alarm for yourself, right, to make sure you don't go over the top. But that's much easier to handle than being forced to go over the top and not enjoying it. So I think, yeah, for me, that's kind of where the sort of the purpose stuff comes in.
Thank you, Andy, Imogen, Chloe. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you, guys. That's it for us this morning. Thank you for joining us. I know that there's going to be a lot of this data and research which is going to be released, and thank you for joining the conversation.